Good evening, everyone. My name is Andrew Markham, and I direct disability studies programs here at the CUNY School of Professional Studies. I'm so pleased and excited to welcome you to this event tonight, a summit on disability culture. I'm especially glad to welcome you here as we celebrate 20 years of disability studies education at the CUNY School of Professional Studies. I want to offer my great thanks and gratitude to SPS events team, Heather Zeman and Molly Joyce and their entire team for helping us organize this event. And of course, I'm thrilled and honored to have our distinguished guest with us tonight, Jerron Herman, Leroy Moore, Ryan Martin, a graduate of our program, and Ashley Shu. Unfortunately, Dr. Shu is unable to join us, but I nonetheless want to acknowledge her and thank her for her wonderful work at the intersection of technology and disability. I was asked by a colleague recently, what is disability culture? As if to say, does disability have a culture? And of course, when we think about disability, we often think about accessibility. Accessibility focuses on the practical dynamics of providing access to information and to spaces and to services. But disability culture refers to something different. It refers to the creativity, to the innovation, and to the lived experiences of people with disabilities. Not only to the ways in which people with disabilities contribute to culture across all cultural arena, from music and the arts and literature to social movements and activism to sports, but also to the ways in which people with disabilities influence and are influenced by the culture, and the ways that we can engage the culture that are sometimes critical of the underlying ableisms and ableistic assumptions that shape the dominant culture. So disability culture is a dynamic thing, and it should not imply uniformity or universality. Rather, it's the opposite. It's an invitation to explore the ways in which disability intersects with all different ways of being, celebrating disability as an aspect of human diversity, rather than as something to be eliminated, controlled, managed, cured. Each of tonight's guests has a lot to say from their own perspective about disability culture and has a lot to teach us about how culture and disability are relational, contingent, dynamic. When I was preparing for tonight's event, I had the pleasure of watching Jerron Herman perform in a short video about his piece, Temporary Body, which I believe is recently at the Smithsonian's Design Museum. And in that piece, he talks about, as a young person, taking his medical diagnosis of hemiplegia cerebral palsy and subverting the language, rewriting it so that hemiplegia becomes hemisphere, globe, worlds, borders, boundaries, cultures, becomes something expansive and dynamic, not something constricting and bounding, but something else entirely. Ryan Martin, as I mentioned, was a student of mine, and when I listened to him talk about sports and disability, at first, he says things like, the meaning of sports is so much more than just winning and losing. It's about what sports helps you do as a person and how it makes you better, how it improves your opportunities. And on one level, that's kind of standard language that we know about sports, that we learn from our dominant culture. but looked at from a disability perspective, it's a way of challenging the ableistic assumptions that are sometimes applied to sports competition, right? That to say that sports is not just about numbers, wins and losses, shots taken. What is it about? It is about who you are as a person, how you fit into your community. And I don't know about you, but if you're around my age, I'm in my mid 40s now. When I was younger, Murder Ball, the movie, was one of my first encounters with disability culture. Um, Murder Ball was a documentary about wheelchair basketball, where these guys just in wheelchairs go after each other and like kill each other, right? And they're just smashing each other, and they're challenging, even as they some degree ratify masculinist ideas about sports, but they're also just totally disrupting our perception of what it means to be in a wheelchair. Leroy Moore, artist and writer, poet, musician, founder of Crip Hop Nation, a co-founder of Sins Invalid. I first came across Leroy's work in 2020. It was following the horrific death in Minneapolis and of George Floyd. And I was working in a nonprofit for self-advocates, people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. A lot of young people, a lot of Black and brown people, people with disabilities who were saying to our organization and their social support groups, we need a way to talk about what's happening. We don't have a language to talk about what's happening. And I think that was in part because people with intellectual disabilities are sometimes seen as not being able to understand what is going on. But as we started to explore what was going on in Minneapolis as a group, Leroy Moore's work came up because he was talking about the connections between racism and police brutality and disability oppression in a way that I hadn't heard before, and that many of the people I was working with had never heard before. And he was speaking in poetry and music in powerful ways that really transcend some of the academic barriers that we in disability studies sometimes encounter when we try to talk about these things. And of course, Ashley Shue, again, although she's not able to join us tonight, her book, I read it for the first time last summer, thanks to Brian Lilley. And the thing that's so striking about it is the way that she subverts the dominant conception of the relationship between disability and technology, where technology is not the savior of disabled people, but disabled people are in fact inventing our own technologies, using technologies to subvert ableism rather than reify it. And so as we move forward with our event, I think how grateful I am to be able to have this conversation with you all and with our panelists, and how excited I am to be talking about this dynamic relationship between disability and culture. Thank you very much. Brian, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Andrew, and welcome everyone. I'm Dr. Brian Lilley. I'm an assistant professor for the Disability Studies programs at the CUNY School of Professional Studies. And for today's event, each of our speakers has been asked to prepare a 10-minute presentation. We've encouraged them to use this time freely and creatively in whatever way they believe best showcases the unique perspective they bring to the theme of disability culture. The speakers have been asked to reflect on how disability culture intersects with their work. After the presentations, we will transition into a panel discussion where our speakers will further explore the intersections of disability culture across their work. Let's begin by introducing our first speaker. Jerron Herman is a dancer and writer who is compelled to create images of freedom. His process is supported by personal histories and social legacies of disability aesthetics that undermine notions of production in favor of welcoming. The nuanced pieces Jerron exhibits contend with an early childhood desire to create many worlds in which others inhabit. Jerron, please take it from here.
Are you able to see? Yeah. Wonderful. Hello, my name is Jerron Herman. I'm a dark-skinned Black man with facial hair and I'm wearing a black shirt, and I'm in front of a white wall. On the screen is my name in black text against a neon green border and the words disability and art, ampersand art. We will be going over my trajectory as an artist and maybe a case study about when disability influence has worked in my process. I really want disability culture to be showcased in art, but also influence the culture of theatrical spaces. From presenting me, a space should feel comfortable or resourced to have their own access aesthetic that can support various body minds. And on the next screen is text from my artistic statement that reads, and I should probably update it, but who knows? I'm drawn to storytelling that narrates abundance, and my artistry intends to present works that embrace full extension of the body and spirit. As a dancer, primarily, I've been thinking about how, you know, extension in movement can also be a way of thinking about extension in theory. Um, I think it still rings true. So 2019 was a really large year for me as an independent artist, which was punctuated by 3 signature works: Relative, Many Ways to Raise a Fist, and Breaking and Entering. Relative was a love letter to the Crip community in particular that takes place in a club. I premiered it during I Want to Be With You Everywhere, a 3-day disabled led festival at Performance Space New York, back in like April 2019. The picture below shows me in a silver jumpsuit provocatively leaning back in front of a crowd on stage. We're all suffused in blue. It was scored by DJ Kevin Gotkin, or Who Girl, and audiences used sub-pack vests to feel their music. In addition, I played with an open plan to allow flow. So, after setting out unique clusters of chairs before the performance, I came on stage to actually see several different iterations of clusters, like self-actualized islands for others to really be on stage with me, be with each other. It was really quite amazing, and that was my first foray into architectural understanding, architecture and dance. And then, of course, with Many Ways to Raise a Fist and Breaking and Entering, which was actually a duet that I premiered with Molly Joyce. Um, these all 3 pieces really helped me discover deliberate and authentic movement from my body, as well as offer space for disabled folks to be reflected in shared experiences or self-govern their art, or their entry into my art. 2022, I expanded to create a full-length piece called Vitruvian that thinks about antiquity's relationship with symmetry through the image of Da Vinci's Vitruvian Man, the classical image of perfection. In addition to dynamic movement, Vitruvian expanded access with a dramaturgically relevant ASL performance, the performer becoming a character. Then there were aesthetic captions to match the color story and personal audio description that I wrote. We made an accessible film to further expand the reach, thinking, does my body always have to be on the line? And the answer being no. Rest appears twice in the work. For 8 minutes, the audience and I decompress and totally allow a moment of stillness, relative stillness in a spectral world. And then the film allows Vitruvian to tour with all the same integrity of the show. And on screen is the word Vitruvian in black text against another green border with 2022 and a sculptural V against a white background. This approach to rest became even more aesthetic for me, and I was commissioned to think about it with this new piece, Lax, a 10-minute solo about the athleticism of rest. The self-composed score it was my first foray into composing, vacillates between soft whispers and lullabies to hard rock. Again, not shying from my experience with spasms, I accentuate the relationship between my body and a piece of movement. However, the solo took on a new life as a responsive art piece in what would be known as my Museum Mile Tour, where I created experiences of Blacks for salons, rooftops, rotundas, and another brother piece, which Andrew mentioned, called Temporary Body. This falls all under a kind of category called Temporale, a new model I'm thinking about and developing to imbue disability culture into museum spaces. Expected services like ASL and captions and touch tours and audio description are included, but we're trying to reveal the ethos of disability justice, such as like interdependence and cross solidarity, as we experience art, and filtering into practices like Black power naps to accent rest and meandering over a singular focus. And on the screen as well is 2024, and all of these pieces that I've mentioned, Lax for Park Avenue Armory, Lax for the Met, Lax for Guggenheim, and Temporary Body, kind of fanning out from the word temporale in kind of spokes. So in a way, like, you know, those are my works, and that's where I am right now. But my other work is kind of consulting and being with others. And in terms of a case study about how when procedures of disability culture really work, I thought about this one project that I did called the Lincoln Center 2-minute dance break, which was a really nice opportunity to show my style of dance, or their desire for Lincoln Center to think about disability movement, and showcase style. Lincoln Center does this. They do it with tap, African dance, hip hop, you know, flamenco. And then when they came to me and asked, like, what could disability movement be? I had to think beyond representation and think about how could it be authentic. So the first thing we did was increase the 1-minute dance break into a 2-minute, because when you're dealing with a disabled body, you always have to expand time. And so from there, we've crafted a really substantive relationship to disability that like changed the framework of this design of Lincoln Center's dance break. And so I'll show you what we did.
Disabled bodies have always danced.
A stop-motion animation of a body, followed by a close-up of a fountain, shot of an arm.
Acknowledging disabled movement as a professional form is recent in Western culture, like 20th century recent.
A body rises vertically. Animated lines mimic the movement.
Since the 90s, and the changes introduced through the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, more disabled people are welcomed members of professional dance companies and are creating their own work.
Lines cross over arching ribs, the details of buildings, and an arm.
The future is bright for disability artistry.
Lines arch an arm and building.
Let's flow through some disabled embodied movement prompts.
Close-up of Jerron, a dark-skinned black man with short locks and a beard wearing neutral tones, sitting in front of a fountain. Animated stars sparkle. The frame expands to lines curving 3 arches.
1. Inhale and lift your shoulders to your ears. Exhale.
Lines move up and down Jerron's torso and shoulders as he breathes in and out. He stands and repeats as water shoots up behind him.
2. Let your lower body pucker out and spiral with your torso until you face another direction.
On a bridge, Jerron sinks his hip and turns away, reaching his arms backward. The word spin hovers above, and swirly lines follow the directions of his body and the building behind him.
3. Stretch your upper body. Reach to the edges of your fingertips, ears, whatever you can stretch out to.
Against vertical columns, Jerron stretches, reaching out. He wraps one arm behind him and lifts, then spins in a tight circle, stretching another arm. His fingertips and chin elongate as animations expand out.
Movement is open to everyone, and disability artistry deserves to be recognized all across the world.
Back on the bridge, short shots of Jerron lifting a leg in a turn and arching his torso in freestyle. Animations burst behind, the words Lincoln Center Dance Break appear in multicolor.
Yeah, so that really, that really animates one thing about the work, which is that authentic curiosity and partnership need to reign supreme when dealing and thinking about disability. I really think that the augmentation from 1 minute to 2 minutes showed the commitment to disability, but itself created a whole new response to disability. And those kinds of things will a material shift of time and capacity is what creates a response to disability, when representation is thought to be the only thing. And then personally, my roles kind of expanded as I was asked to be a performer, and from there, invariably, because of the nature of thinking about creative access and creative disability, or showcasing disability creatively, I became a producer, a talent, audio describer, and a writer on this whole project in order to like bring the whole thing to fruition. So I think that's time for me. I'll stop there, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jerron. Up next, we have Ryan Martin. Ryan is the Director of Inclusive and Adaptive Sports for the City University of New York. This includes men's and women's wheelchair basketball teams, as well as emerging wheelchair tennis and track programs. Ryan was recognized as the 2022 College Coach of the Year by the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee. Ryan recently served as the president of the National Wheelchair Basketball Association. Ryan, over to you.
Hi, good afternoon, and Brian, thank you for the warm introduction and the opportunity to be on with such an esteemed group of panelists. Apologize, I'm stuck in Chicago traffic, and so if it's a little noisy, I'm on a bus. Our basketball team is heading to Wisconsin to play in a tournament against student athletes from the University of Wisconsin. So really happy to join this conversation today, and just kind of my whole life has been influenced by the opportunity to participate in adaptive sports. As a young athlete with a disability, it really gave me that sense of belonging and that sense of purpose, and it gave me a place to really fit in a society that just saw me as an individual with a disability. I'm often quoted as saying wheelchair basketball gave me that first place where somebody looked at what I was capable of doing as an individual with a disability versus rather looking at me with my limitations. The sport of wheelchair basketball has taken me all around the world. I've gotten the opportunity to attend college on a wheelchair basketball scholarship. Also got a chance to play professionally in Europe and experience other cultures. As an individual with a disability, I lived 10 years in Europe, 8 years in Spain, and 2 years in France, and got a chance to travel a great deal and get a different understanding around sports, disability, and disability culture, different from what we have here in the United States. One of the things that in my professional life I really enjoy, whether it's serving in my nonprofit roles or as my role at the university, is providing this opportunity for other individuals with disabilities to use the talents they have to get a degree and seek a higher quality of life through gainful employment and through higher education. One of the things that I think we're witnessing right now across our country and almost globally is this recognition around inclusive sports or the Paralympics, and how that is becoming more of a commonplace on our TV screens. We see investment of corporate dollars to showcase athletes with individual disabilities. And I'm sure we'll get into the pros and cons of this sort of recognition. I think on the high side of this, I think you can look at adaptive sports and sports for individuals with disabilities starting to cross into different lanes of disability culture and allowing us to kind of change the common nomenclature around disability to looking at what individuals with disabilities are capable of doing versus, kind of that traditional medical model approach of where we evaluate individuals with disabilities based on what they're not able to do. I think sport has a way of really influencing society and culture. When we look around Jackie Robinson breaking the color barrier during the civil rights movement, and then during the time where we had Jim Crow South, or you look at the impact of Title IX legislation and the impact in women's sports and what that has done in other areas and other verticals of society beyond the sports realm. So I think this is a really important thing to include into this conversation of disability and culture. And I think what I ultimately hope is that from a stigma and a cultural perspective, we can start looking at individuals individually versus, a conception of limitations based on a medical model approach. And it also shows the social model theory in practice that if you're able to provide opportunities for individuals to succeed, that they can be contributing members of society, right? The Paralympic movement shows that if you create opportunities around sports for individuals with disabilities, they can do great things. I think the next step is to have this conversation about adaptive sports and Paralympic sports start to transition into kind of what I think are the two really big barriers on society and disability, which would be the stigma surrounded on disability, and I've model versus the the social model, but also like really getting into the impact of good government policy on on things for individuals with disabilities to be a welcome member of society and a contributing member of society. I think the Paralympic Games can start to show us that, albeit I would say there are some drawbacks to that if we don't properly educate ourselves. But what I like about sports is a common understanding, just like music, just like art, that can start to break down some of those barriers and break down some of those walls. So I want to thank Dr. Markham and Dr. Lee for the opportunity to join this panel tonight. And I look forward to a continual conversation.
Thank you, Ryan. Now let's welcome Leroy Moore. Writer, activist, and music archivist Leroy Franklin Moore Jr. was born with cerebral palsy in New York City. Chair of the Black Disability Studies Committee for the National Black Disability Coalition, founder of the Crip Hop Nation Project, and co-founder of the performance art collective Sins Invalid. Moore's work illuminates intersections between racism and ableism, both in the United States and abroad. Leroy, the stage is yours.
Thank you. You guys can hear me? Yeah, good. All right. So first I want to say rest in peace, Steve Brown. Steve Brown was a friend of mine. I had a chance to interview him many a times, who I call the godfather of disability culture. And his wife, Lily Brown, both of them together started the Disability Culture Institute. So shout out to Lily Brown and rest in peace, Steve Brown. One of the last conversations I had with Steve, I brought up that there has to be more than one disability culture, especially if you add race and open it up to an international scale. There has to be Black, Latino, Asian, Indigenous disability culture, but it's up to those groups to do that research, that writing, that advocacy. But to get to this point, we have to see it as a process to erase ableism in our communities of color. From this point on, I'll be talking about the Black community, Black ableism, and how to get to what I call Black Crip radicalization. I'm going to do this through video. So the first video that we're going to see, the title is Disability Culture and Black Disability Culture. Let's continue to build it. So we're going to see that. This is a little speech from myself. It's on my YouTube page. I don't think it's captioned. Sorry about that.
Disability cultures. There should be Black disability culture, Latino disability culture, Asian disability culture. But those cultures need to be built up from the ground up. We haven't done it yet. We have the the umbrella of disability culture. But what does disability culture mean to a Black person or an Asian person? That's the work that we have to do in our own communities, on and off the internet. So what is Black disability culture? I saw it in London, I saw it in Toronto, I saw it in South Africa, where Black disabled people came together and not only start their own organization, but start doing poetry and writing books and researching their ancestors. So it's out there. We just need to continue to build it, and scholars need to write about it. All right, peace, Leroy Moore. Rest in peace, Stephen Brown.
Right. So the second video is entitled "More Than a Thought for Black and Brown Disabled People, Our Future Work."
I think it's the future of Black and Brown disabled activists, especially Black and Brown disabled radical activists. Here it goes. For decades and more, disabled people of color been using white disabled theories and movement philosophies like the social model of disability to the independent living philosophy. Besides what Sins and Valid gave us, disability justice, I argue that we need more of our own Black and Brown disability terminology, theories, concepts, philosophies, art, culture, radical politics, music, history, locally and internationally. And we need to uplift more of our Black and Brown disabled ancestors, and or Black cripping these white disabled theories and movement philosophies, while at the same time Black cripping Black theories and movement philosophies. If we don't, then we will continue to try to fit in or be satisfied with inclusion, not liberation. I think that's the future of Black and Brown disabled activists, especially Black and Brown disabled radical activists that want to work outside of mainstream. All right, peace, Leroy Moore.
All right, thank you, tech person. So I shared with you earlier my master thesis that was just published last quarter. The title is "Propagation Community-Based Education at the Intersection of Blackness and Disability." In that master thesis, I talk about Cedric J. Robertson. Cedric J. Robertson was a Black thinker, really radical Black thinker. Went to UC Berkeley back in the day, and he came out with Black Marxism, the Black radical tradition, and that's what I did in that master thesis. And in my first comp exam that I passed in a couple days ago is equipping the Black radical tradition. So what does that mean for Black disabled people if we take our thinkers back in time like Cedric J. Robertson and others in Black Crippet? So that was the master thesis. And I go on to say that there's phases involving to get to Black radical, Black radicalization, because there needs to be phases into it, because we are going from from decades and decades of wrongful education and oppression, from slave masters to religious to charity model. So all of that has to go in phases. So phase one that I put out there is that Black disabled people have to see themselves first, locally and globally. For example, when my mom put me in front of the TV in the 70s and turned on Porgy and Bess, that shocked my brain because that's the first time I saw a Black disabled man on TV. That changed my whole life. I couldn't, go back and just be clueless. So, seeing yourself in your society is really important. And phase two is that once you see yourselves and once you become educated, once you step into these spaces that they include us, that means you're Black cripping the space. So Black cripping, what does that cripping mean? And I use a K. Black cripping means that once again you're seeing that space, you're coming into the space with all your ideas. So you're seeing first that space haven't include you. So you have to Black crip it first to make it friendly. So that's phase two. And these phases have like paragraphs. So I'm just highlighting, certain, like a sentence or two. So phase two is during and after Black cripping, we must and should continue to politicalize and mobilize our community, our Black community, Black history, Black culture, and all that stuff. So we're continuing to politicalize our community. And once you're politicalizing your identity, Black and disabled, then you're moving past awareness and past self-pride to come to a political stance around this. So you're politically and culturally coming out as a person with a disability. And that's stage 4. So all these stages could go, into each other, except stage 1. Stage 1 is very important and must sit alone. So that's my stages of becoming Black radicalization, because you're going from being invisible to self-pity to charity to seeing yourself as a person with disability and becoming politically and culturally disabled. So you're becoming radicalized in those phases. So I'm gonna leave you with a poem that I wrote called Black Queer Radicalization. So if you can play that, thank you. 555 can't get no higher. Black queer radicalization. 555 no liberals here. Listen up more than your ears. Black sign language everywhere. It's a process. Not satisfied
what mainstream gives us, collecting the crumbs for a meal, knowing what's fake and what's real. Fire, 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 the heat is on.
Okay, we
Fire,
can
fire,
stop
fire.
there. I want to say one thing. I know when I say this thing in public, people don't understand it. But I want to say that it's not about inclusion. We've been here. People with disabilities have been here. Moses was disabled, so we've been here. So it's not about inclusion. It's about liberation, and it's about bringing it back to the people that didn't do their work. You know, the government didn't do their work. Our laws are not fully funded and not fully implemented. So we could do all the inclusion in the world, but it's not tapped with implementation of the laws and fully fund the laws, then we're just wasting our time.
Alert, thumbs up someone late.
Oh, sorry. A little bit of history, and I'll let it go, is that when Biden came in office the first year, he promised to fully fund IDEA, the Individual Disability Act. I was like, what happened? He woke up? The dude's been in office since the law has passed. I was like, what happened? He hasn't done it. So once again, it's not about inclusion, it's about liberation and telling people that they need to do their work so we can do our work. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Leroy, and thank you again, Ryan and Jerron. So we will now move into the panel discussion where our speakers will engage with one another. And in the interest of time, Andrew and I will direct each question to one panelist who will just get us started and answer that question first. And then after that, we encourage you, the other panelists, to respond to one another in an open exchange. So for our first question, let's start with Jerron. So each of the fields represented among this panel tonight engages with disability culture in distinct ways. What are some common themes or ideas that emerge when considering how disability culture shapes these different areas? So we'll start with Jerron, and then after Jerron responds, the other panelists are welcome to share their thoughts.
Yeah, this is Jerron speaking. Thanks, Brian. I was the two things that come up, and it's really quite stunning to be on a panel with a co-founder of a whole principle theory. Like, we use 10 principles of disability justice from Sins Invalid and on like in often, so often, and I think that there's something so kind of powerful about undermining productivity. So, I mean, really, for me, I think that there's this element of worth is not put in solely in the body. I also think that there's this theme of course, interdependence, right? Like, the communities that we're talking about are self-regulating, are created in order so that they can assist and adjust with each other, outside of the category that they're placed. So for me in art making, it's I don't cower or even adjust to the theater. It's to the audience, or it's to the collaborators, it's to the audience. And so there's this other element of kind of, and I'm sure Ryan, it's it's the team and to Leroy, it's the people. There's just this kind of collectivization that happens for us in our spaces, in order that disability can flourish, or our ideas can flourish, that they can germinate and move. Yeah, I think I'll stop there. That's what I got.
Ryan or Leroy, do you want to jump in next?
Can you repeat the question again?
Sure. So the question for the panel is that each of the fields represented among this panel engages with disability culture in distinct ways. What are some common themes or common ideas that emerge when considering how disability culture shapes these different areas?
Yeah, thank you for the question because I'm dealing with that in my graduate work and my PhD work, you know, pretty Black disability culture into theories that have been around for decades and hasn't really had the quick vision of it. And I think that will change a lot, because like I said, I think sometimes we feel comfortable in our space, in the disability space. So sometimes we don't go outside that space to equip other theories, other histories, and that work needs to be done. And that work can help erase what I call Black ableism if we continue to equip spaces, Black spaces that has never been equipped before. So yeah, so I think that work can open up a lot of minds and yeah, yeah.
I would agree with both of my colleagues here in the sense that I think all of our disciplines show the power of what is possible for an individual to be able to use their field and their area of expression to identify themselves, but also to provide a lane for other people to use that same opportunity, whether it's through sports or music or any of the disciplines that we're really kind of talking about here. What I think I'd like to see is I'd like to see, you know, all of our individual areas be kind of morphed into the common discussion around music, the common discussion around sports. And I think while we need to preserve and protect our identity in these areas, I think it's also really powerful when we can have our discussion be included in the greater discussion of just culture and society. And it doesn't necessarily have to be segmented into, okay, we're only talking about, you know, disabled sports or things of that nature. So that would be my outlook on it.
Great. So I think everyone's had a chance to respond to the first question. So we'll move to the second question. This is a two-part question. And Ryan, I'll ask you to start us off. The first part is, what ways has your work confronted societal expectations about what disabled people can or quote unquote should do in arts, sports, or technology? Second part, what can we learn from how other fields address this?
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. I think, you know, speaking specifically about sport, I think sport shows the capacity of an individual to adapt and still be able to excel in an area where, you know, oftentimes in my work, I'm confronted with like, well, how can that individual athlete be able to accomplish this? And what does that look like? You know, I think the ultimate hope that I think, and, you know, maybe it's a little bit idealistic, is the concept that, you know, those learnings that the greater society can see through sport can be applied in other areas. You know, my thought process is always that if you can change somebody's perspective in, you know, in regards to what an individual with a disability is capable of doing, whether it's in sports or music or art or theater or, you know, academia, I think that can transcend into other verticals, other pillars of society, and it doesn't have to just stay into that conversation of sport. So one of the things I'd love to see is more of this kind of conversation. And
Thanks, Ryan. I think we might have lost your audio there at the end. I'm not sure.
yeah, sorry about that. I'll let one of my other colleagues jump in on this one.
Sure, feel free to go ahead, Jerron or Leroy.
Okay, you know, something that comes up for me is, this is Jerron. In my movement, I think I've stopped shying away from showing fragility or what's real. You know, what's real about a disabled body, what's real about living this life, you know, and also what's real about the beauty of it, you know? So like I'm very deep in constructing vocabulary, movement vocabulary that, you know, talks about history and legacy of what it might feel like to be in a disabled body. A colleague, friend, Dan Daw does this internationally he's a dancer with cerebral palsy. And I remember seeing a show of his that I had just a visceral reaction to. It was kind of like a scene wherein a care worker was working on him in an aggressive way, but the aggression was really beautiful and like accepting. And I just, in the way that he was caring for his arm, the care worker was caring for Dan's arm, I like felt it in my body. So now I'm on the tip of like, you should feel in your body something of exuberance or extension. And also like we're gonna show like pause, we're gonna show spasm, we're gonna show like, for me in my work, we're not, you know, that's something that I'm no longer trying to like sanitize, you know, the disabled experience for non-disabled folks or for, you know, because I think that has a tendency to relay some kind of deficiency still, you know, like, oh, you're not allowed to show everything. And I'm like, yes, we can.
Yeah, I can can I be raw? I think in 2024, we just have to sue people. That's all do it. But it's 2024. I mean, our culture, our arts, our sports, our laws should be should be should be out there. Should be more out there. And I think why it's not more out there is that people get away with not doing shit. You know, just be honest. I'm I'm in graduate school, right? I come to find out there's only 2% of disabled students get to graduate school. 2%. It's 2025. It's just amazing, you know. Every day I wake up and I go to class or, you know, I work on hip hop and, you know, I think of my past and I think, okay, yeah, we came a long way. But still, you know, once again, I say it once again, is that our laws are not fully funded. You know, when I went to the Paralympics in 89, it was nowhere to be seen. And even the Paralympics in London, after the Paralympics and even before, government was cutting services. It's like those, so we have to, I don't know, but it's just, we have to do more to shock the society. And I think now with this presidential election, we have no choice. The gloves are off, you know, the gloves are off. So in my work, with this PhD that I'm getting, the goal is to open up the Hip Hop Institute because I realized that there's not one space in this country that Black and brown disabled people can go learn about their past, learn about the culture, the music, the arts that go all the way back to the blues. You know, there's not one place. You know, I grew up in New York. I used to walk up past the Schaumburg. I used to tell my mom, it's like, I'm gonna get into the Schaumburg one day. I'm gonna have a Black disabled event at the Schaumburg. Man, I tried for years, even other people tried. And now it's like, you know, it's just time to build our own space so people can come to our own space. And yes, the internet is good, social media is work good, but once you shut off your computer and go into the community, that's a different thing. I did it a couple months ago. I went into Inglewood in LA. I asked 50 people. And I know this is a small sample, but I asked 50 people about their knowledge about the ADA, disability justice, hip hop, and all the work, and only 2 people knew about it. 2 out of 50. So there's a lot of work to be done on the ground. I mean, yes, social media has gave us access, but we can't forget the communities. We can't forget, you know, grassroots movement and education in the community. So hopefully, Hip Hop Institute will be a place where people can come and get in and get that education physically, you know. So yeah.
Thank you, Leroy. And I just want to say we have a few more questions for our panel. And as we continue through our panel discussion, we encourage and invite you in our audience to share your questions for our panelists using Zoom's Q&A feature. Moving through the questions that we still have for the panel, for our next question, let's start with you, Leroy. So the question is, disability culture is reshaping how society views inclusion and creativity. And the question for you is, and the whole panel, what do you think your field contributes to this cultural shift? And how might the perspectives from your field influence a broader cultural understanding of disability?
Yeah, oh God, hip hop, when it was born, and even before hip hop, I've always wanted to 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 find my people, you know. That's why I went to London back in the 90s and I found a Black disabled movement. I wanted to find my people. So this is so my work on the hip hop has touched internationally. We had chapters all through Africa, um, Germany. We're talking to people in Brazil. In Brazil is hot. I mean, yeah, I need to go there and really study because Brazil has a Black disabled movement that's really concentrating and educating the Black community. So yeah, so Brazil is I need to go there. But I think hip hop work has really stepped up from the I to the we. And I think a lot of disabled events and talks and stuff are stuck on the I and don't see a we. And hip hop has, you know, gone international. We've had tours around Europe, South Africa, you know, Canada. And not only music for music's sake, but you know, politically, you know, changing people's mindset around this way. And like I said in the beginning, you know, discovering disability culture when I was in those spaces. When I was in Johannesburg, I saw a break dancer that had no legs and he was kicking ass. So those are the things that I think hip hop work is, really growing up and also having new terminology. We came up with the term Afro crip. So bringing disability in the African diaspora and having our own terminology. So yeah, I'll stop there.
This is Jerron. Just to piggyback, I just what inspires me is to change the models, right? Like particularly in the art world, it's very company driven. I really appreciate Leroy, the like thinking about the I instead of the we, because it's so like in the modern art world, it's always about this genius. It's about like I created this, I founded this, I made this, and almost in order just to be to be a commodity. And I think that I'm working with some really exciting, working in a true kind of collective membrane, um, with artists like Molly, Christopher Umpes Verde Nunez, myself, and this wonderful like producer, thinker, creator named Candace Feldman. And our shop, like our little like boutique, is trying to like literally teach like these spaces how to decolonize themselves, almost like how they can also, as we're presenting a work about rest, they too can like try to rest, or they can like also pick up on some of these practices in the office or on their way to work or online on Zoom. And so, the art can be imitated, for the structures, and also to create little mini elements. I think art has a real opportunity to like alleviate some ills personally and kind of culturally. And it's really it's really cheesy, but love, like teaching people to love, and what love is, and what how to be part of love. I don't Yeah, it's a verb, and it doesn't get enough scholarship. But yeah.
I think from my perspective, I think disability in sport, I think gives an opportunity for us to see a variety of disability. And I think it also allows um, the profile of advocates to change the narrative that individuals in mainstream society are seeing around disability in sport. And like, at the risk of sounding cheesy and idealistic, again, you hope that that transcends into other areas, whether it's, I think all of us hope that within our individual discipline, that there's just a greater knowledge and a greater understanding around disability, and that can make things more inclusive, more creative, and more open from a broader society. I think the negative side to this, in the sporting realm, is I think everybody with a disability, gets lumped into this big population around, oh, you must be a Paralympian, or you must be super competitive and you're in the sport. So I think it's really important that we acknowledge that sport is just one of these pieces that can really help us shape a narrative around disability culture. And then we hope that makes things, opens dialogue into other areas where we need more conversation and more improvement as far as the plight of the disabled community and a broader understanding from mainstream society in regards to what does that actually look like.
Anyway, I just wanted to say that it takes time. It takes I know it's kind of cliche, but for example, UCLA came after me to do this PhD. I wasn't thinking about graduate school at all, but because of 20 years of doing hip hop, and my advisor does hip hop, he saw the work that I've been doing and said, hey, you should come to UCLA. I know that there's only one story, but it tells me that once you work at something, you know, although it's radical and believe me, I've got so many slam doors in my face out of the 20 years doing hip hop. But you know, doors do open, and you have to take advantage of that and push it to the next level. And hopefully, you know, we all are doing that. You know, so yeah.
Thank you, everyone, for these fantastic insights so far. I think we've arrived at our last question for the panelists, and we'll start with Jerron with this one. To the panelists, what role do you see for cross-disciplinary collaboration in advancing disability culture? Are there specific projects or initiatives that you think would benefit from integrating other insights from other areas? You could speak even directly to your own work. And looking at your work tonight, I see so many connections that I would love to hear you elaborate on. So the floor is yours, Jerron, Leroy, and Ryan.
Thanks. You know, this is Jerron. Oh, I'll wait. You guys are good to switch. Good. Okay. For as a dancer, you know, I have to convince people that I'm an athlete. And so I'm very interested in yeah, I really like what Ryan's saying about like can we just name this as athleticism, or as scholarship, or as critique, or as art, sometimes without needing the qualifier. But I also know that like a part of my practice is with scholarship, with sport nomenclature, with technology, is to be like, you all have had this theory, or you've had this process. Coding it as disabled shouldn't be a problem, or it should add on to what you do, and it in fact should like tell you that that brain fog that you eventually will have, or that that element of slowness that you will develop, or any kind of relationship to debility, or any kind of fluctuating body mind that you might have any given hour or day, shouldn't disqualify you, or or separate us. So my work is actually like less about see me, and more like see yourself among this, because you're part of it. It's not separate. And we just notice you benefit from a lot of it. But also I think a lot of it is to not make it sound like the boogeyman, the disability as this boogeyman. And that's racially coded as well, like entirely. And cross sectioning is like, I kind of love Leroy saying that it takes time, because it doesn't have to be all at once. Like, it should be really methodically. Like, Ryan and I should do a collab once, and then Leroy and I should do a collab, or Andrew and I should do a collab, and then after we've refined, then and then it's Ryan and me number 2, and then it's Ryan and me number 1, and so that latticing can really like start to affect, because we have a tendency to do it all at once and try to like maximize it. But I think it's really interesting how quality of like moving forward and liberation actually is to go slower, actually is to be more methodical, actually is to do less, right, and do more in a kind of quality way. So I didn't say much in the way of that answering that question. But that's what's been really on my heart.
Thank you, Jerron. I heard a lot in that I really appreciated. Ryan or Leroy, would you like to add?
I think for me, just kind of looking at all of our work and just the idea of empowerment and the idea of us trying to all uplift and educate and all of this, I think the one thing is, and I appreciate the comment that it takes time, is just the importance of us being able to advocate, not just in our own areas, in our own space, but the importance of being able to advocate for other aspects of, disability and culture. Because I think we're all saying the same things. We all see the same struggles in our same areas, and we also are all in this for kind of the same reason. So I just think of, the importance of being patient and consistent in our advocacy, and not just advocating for your one area, your one part, but just the, kind of the greater good. Because, when I listen to everybody's answers, I'm doing a lot of, nodding my head, right? Where I was, and I'm identifying a lot with, two disciplines that probably I know very little about, but I can see a lot of similarities. And, so that would just be kind of my thought on, the importance is really around advocacy and that continual awareness and education piece.
Yeah, thank you. Anyway, I think it's really knowing your work and knowing that your work is getting out there. I know somebody in the comments talk about how we're not at the global table. We are, and sometimes we have to make our own table. And that's what Queer Popular has done. We haven't been in not one hip hop conference. We've been here for almost 25 years. Not one hip hop conference said, "Oh, Queer Pop come." But we just did our first LA Queer Pop event. And once again, I did on my SSI budget, but we did it. So the thing is like, what do we get by being at the table, and what do we get by making our own table? And that's the question. I've worked in nonprofits, display sector all my life. And when I stepped out to do my own organization, I got a lot of pushback, but also I got a lot of love saying, "Leroy, this needs to be done." So, we have to take our punches and we have to take our praise at the same time and really be upfront of what we're doing. Sometimes people say, "Leroy, you're too radical." It's like, well, that's that's how I am. That's how I am. But yeah, just I know it sounds cliche, they continue your work, but also, we have Queer Pop was born on MySpace back in the day. MySpace. This is before Facebook, before Twitter, before anything else, and it blew up internationally. I mean, we had our first tour in the UK, not in the US, not in the Bay Area where disability culture is hot. We had to go to the UK, So that tells you that we need to use the tools that we have to make it global.
Well, thank you again to our panelists. We want to transition now to questions from our audience. And I know we've got some great questions for our audience, and I'm interested to hear your thoughts. And as we transition, I've I'm just struck by the some of the themes that come up over and over again. You know, representation, visibility, asserting our own power, building our own spaces, vulnerability, and not being afraid of vulnerability in our bodies and the failures of our bodies, which is just part of who we are, and how we can convey that. You know, even going from a 1-minute video to a 2-minute video, just the way that simple manifestation of disability culture challenges ableist conceptions of time and what the way things have to be or don't have to be. I just appreciate it so much. So let's look at some of the questions in the QA. We'll start with Danny Lucchese. How do you see disability culture continuing to evolve at SPS or in New York City? Or I guess for the panelists, where you are. Would you all consider starting a disability culture center? Leroy, I know this is a subject close to your heart because you're kind of doing that. And would you envision that? What do you envision that looking like? So I guess any of the panelists could start here, and then perhaps Brian and I could weigh in, I guess, on the SPS part. Jerron, you're in NYC. Maybe you could speak to that element.
Get with your friends. Like I literally learned everything I need to know about disability culture from being with folks, being with other disabled creatives, thinkers. So
great. Find your people, like Leroy was saying earlier, right? And he's finding his people all over the world. I think as far as SPS is concerned, continuing more events like this, having this as an annual event, continuing to make the event more robust, and bringing in the incredible talent and creativity that we have all around us. Raising the profile of the idea of disability culture in our events and in our courses and curriculum, I think could set the stage for setting up a cultural center or collaborating with partners in the city or the community to contribute to disability culture in a sustained and consistent way. Brian, do you have anything you want to add on that part?
Sure. I'll just say briefly, I think that there is a lot of really important disability cultural work happening at SPS and at CUNY. I've been here for over a year at this point, and I'm still amazed at, that I'm constantly hearing about important work happening on this front that I was not aware of before. What I really see now is a need to create shared sustaining spaces for that work to happen in an ongoing and collaborative way. And I think that sort of goes to the point that Andrew was just making about the importance of events like this one and making this a regular annual event. And that might be one sort of space. And then a second point I'll make is just that I think we would like to continue providing opportunities for our amazing students to lead large projects and showcase more of their work.
I think as an SPS alumni, I think one of the things that really drew me to the program was the quality of the professors, and then also the development of the curriculum and how it really challenged your way of thinking. I think one of the ways that I think CUNY SPS can kind of lead this discussion is continuing panels like this, and also continuing to provide that education source. I think that is a vastly critical thing to get our history out there, because all of this dialogue spans from our history and understanding, legal, educational, all of those aspects around disability. So I think SPS continuing to commit to that as being a beacon for this level of education through the city is a really a critical component to that.
And I think we need to really step up and really support the people that are doing the work. I began, paying respect to Stephen Brown, and the Disability Cultural Institute. That's still happening, folks. We need to support that. Lillian is taking it over with my help, but that in San Francisco, they're opening up a new disability culture center that's now on campus. This will be the first one that's going to be in the community. We need to support that. For the Hip Hop Institute, oh my God, I have visions of getting a space. I just made a decision that I'm going to stay here in LA, but getting a space where it could be, floors of, library, stage, uh, a spot where all chapters can see each other, but that's gonna take money and support. I'm gonna hit up the Paralympics because they're coming to LA, and they have this program called Legacy or something. So yeah, they need to get out their butts and support the Hip Hop Institute. This is gonna help the LA community, and the community international is gonna be the first of its kind. So yeah, people with deep pockets need to get get off the couch and really support it. So
Thank you, Leroy. Looks like our next question is from Claudia. And Claudia says, I have been having my own personal debate with the word inclusion, and hearing the presentations gave me the confidence to think from somewhere else, but not inclusion. I want to ask the panelists, what are the options? It is my first time hearing about crippling the systems, and I love it. Thank you for your question, Claudia. To our panelists, the question is, if not inclusion, then what are the other options?
oh my God, can I take this? I've been
Please.
I've been writing about this for a while, and I'm just wrote an essay that's going to be looked at. But I think switching it to, like I said, liberation, and also I realized that a lot of disabled scholars, a lot of panels that I do see on YouTube, a lot of scholars start with our oppression. And instead, because of our oppression, it's intersectionality. I like to flip it and say it's because of our culture, our resistance, and our activism that that we have this identity that needs to be talked about. I think it's I think that if we only rely on our oppression and looking through our oppression, then that's not gonna solve the stigma of disability. But if we look through the culture, the history, the protests, all that stuff, and that changes a lot. So and like I said, inclusion is it's just a thing that we're gonna go around and around. Inclusion was outreach in the 80s. It's almost the same thing. But if we could just say no, we've been here, and we want you to enforce what you're doing, than just do it. It's not about including, it's about doing the work, governments, agencies, that really hasn't done the work, So yeah.
Another question comes from an anonymous attendee. They write, with respect to disability culture, how can people who seek to be allies and advocates contribute positive energy without being intrusive or appropriative? What is the role of currently non-disabled people in advancing disability culture? Is there a role at all? And I guess Jerron or Ryan or any of the panelists are free to answer that.
Personally, I think there's definitely a role for allies within the disabled community. I think the advice that I always try to give is to be an informed ally and really come into the space in a genuine way, but be willing to learn and be willing to be a part of the movement. I think oftentimes when allies come into the movement, they're uncomfortable, and I think it takes more, right? The strides that we need to make as a culture and as a community needs everybody. And ultimately, we need to get the discussion around disability rights into the common discussion around human rights and around social justice, which requires us to bring in members, ally members to our community. But I think being educated and then being open to learn as you go are my two pieces of advice there. Leroy, feel free to, or Jerron.
Yeah, I'll be quick, John. I'll be quick. I think, yeah, there's role for allies, but I have seen in the last 6, 7 years that around disability justice, that it's been hinted and played so much that I think it's just lost its original powerful ways. I see it in universities. I saw Kane telling disability justice platforms. There's foundations that had disability justice grants. I was like, wow. So yeah, you can be an ally, but you can't steal our work and make it popular, and that's what I see. And I have to be honest, I'm in academia, but I see that a lot in academia, that they take community activist work and it's also a course. I was like, what the hell? I sat down my second year here. I sat down with a professor in the nursing department that wanted to do a class around disability justice and nursing. I was like, wait, hold on. And she was a Caucasian middle class, non-disabled person. It's like,
Alert,
wow.
red circle breaking. Houston Royal suing Diddy for now being sued for assault.
So yeah, there's a role for allies, but we have to be very protective about our work and about our theories, and making sure that our work goes into the community first. I mean, that's how Black studies started, and that's why Black studies have a long, dedicated history to the community. So if you don't have the community ties, then it's yeah. So I'll keep it there.
Okay, next we have a batch of questions. It's just one question for each of our three panelists, and these come from Catherine. And it starts with Jerron. So Jerron, this is your question from Catherine. How do you feel disability culture and dance can be part of big dance festivals, such as the American Dance Festival in my home state of North Carolina?
Yeah, well, I'm happy to say, Catherine, that I've been to ADF twice as a performer, and as a So, but I will say that it was through a physically integrated dance company, and not through a disabled-led company. So, take that what you will. That's like that's really where we are in terms of the history of disability and in dance per se, wherein we're kind of just at the start of when some politically and medically diagnosed disabled folks are resourced enough to be on a circuit like ADFs, like, other dance festivals. So there's a bit of a growth spurt happening right now. Also, just like Leroy said, the international space is like really bumping for disabled artists. So that's really readily available to us as well. Yeah, I think you don't have to worry. In like 2 years, it should be like you should have like more than one at ADF, hopefully.
Thank you, Jerron. Leroy, the next question is for you. How can HBCUs and disability culture with Black students remove barriers and stigma?
Ooh, God, that's a loaded one. Oh my God. So it's so funny. It's so funny. It's so hard not to talk about the I, but I gotta talk about the I. It's interesting because I've been on the college circuit since '98. Yeah, so I've been lecturing at colleges since '98. I haven't been invited to HBCUs ever. So that should tell you something. And once again, I bring up Black ableism. It needs this work needs to happen. And I know I'm older, but I think it needs to happen offline because we need to go deep into the roots of why we have this Black tables and why HBCUs don't have disability studies or have a limited disability studies. So that's the work that needs to be done in our communities. And it also needs to be done in Black scholars. I was at the DNC almost 8 years ago, and I bumped into Mike Dyson. Mike Dyson, the Black scholar. I told him, I was like, dude, you need to talk about like disability issues. And he just walked away. And it's like, all right, and, so yeah, that's the work that needs to be done. There's still a national Black Disability Coalition. I'm not involved in it no more, but they're still there, so you can get to those people. And there's other Black disabled activists that's doing the work. I think they need that outreach to them. So yeah.
All right. And Ryan, what would you like to see from sports broadcast companies like ESPN in terms of adaptive or Paralympic sports and their sports commentary?
That's a great question. I think we've seen a lot of strides over the last couple of years in the language and the storytelling. I'd like to see continual strides of, obviously talking about the athlete first before the disability piece. I still find like ESPN and some of those larger entities really kind of go with the inspo porn approach. So I'd like there to be like kind of a general understanding of, basic ways to report on an athlete with a disability that are positive or negative, right? But have nothing to do with the disability. I think there's still room to grow. And I think I also would like to see the same side, more coverage of disabled sports or adaptive sports. I think it's few and far between. And I think part of that is because they haven't figured out how to do the storytelling. I'm hopeful that with the Paralympic Games and some improvements and some of the representation that we saw NBC focus on with their athletes, the athletes' voices of individuals with disabilities who are doing the reporting, that's a step in the right direction. But I'd like to see the elimination of that inspo porn story, and let's just focus on the sport. Let's focus on the athlete, and the disability is a part of it, but it's a part of it.
Right, Ryan. I think you should other people should get in contact with Edge of Sports. Mike Zion. He had me on a couple times. He's wide open. He's progressive, radical, and likes to talk about all kinds of sports. So that should be a good channel.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, especially now because the Paralympics is coming. It'd be a good time to do it. Yeah. Sorry.
No, thank you, Leroy. I appreciate the suggestion. It's great. Brian, do you want to take the next couple of questions?
Sure. Yeah. So our next question is from Roberta. I believe this is for Leroy. The question is, are there places to see Crip Hop? TikTok, Instagram, etc. What about other dance and art forms?
So for Crip Hop, we are on Instagram. I left TikTok. We're a little bit on Twitter. I'm about to leave that because politics of it sucks. We're not on Facebook because they don't like my activism, I guess. So we're really on Instagram. Yeah. Yeah.
Great. The next question is from Catherine. Hello, Katie. Glad you're here. This is for Leroy as well. Have you had any interest of working with the staff at the National Hip Hop Museum in New York to promote disability culture and celebrities in the hip hop culture who may identify with disabilities?
Yeah, I got a story for that. We tried to reach out to them, and their answer is that they want us to do fundraising for them. I was like, hold it. I'm an SSI, I'm a graduate student, and you wanted me to do fundraising for you, and you just got like millions from the mayor that's now in trouble. But anyway, yeah, I mean, I'm still open if people has contacts. I'm still open because there's a lot of hip hop history that has a disabled lens. This legend, graffiti artist, Past Two had one arm. So I would love to talk to them to see how we can work together and to see how they can help us build Crip Hop Institute so they can come to the Crip Hop Institute and learn. That's one of the goals of having Crip Hop Institute is having these museums and centers that have no clue around disability. They come to the Crip Hop Institute and learn. The African American Museum that is in DC, when it opened up, I could not believe that they didn't have nothing in Braille. I was like, are you serious? And that museum cost $1 billion to open. So yeah. So anyway.
Thank you, Leroy. And I think that your comments there really connect well with our next question for the panel from JD, which is, how can disabled people work across movements and issues when so many people are in denial about the ongoing COVID epidemic and the long COVID crisis, which has eugenic harms to our community?
I'll say that like part of it is again like making it stopping the tendency to separate disability. I know that like we definitely want to think about it politically and as a function of power, to remedy historical ills, but at the same time, there's a potential that, and not disability, but debility has a very huge reference for human life. And people, if they were to even just, I mean, the best case scenario is that someone who's non-disabled thinks about disability just as much as they think about their own conversations and their own experiences. um so again, I would say that like it's about not separating what affects disabled folks as though it's separate from what, or not only separate from what non-disabled folks can experience. And maybe there will be a little bit more collaboration that comes from that, because you know I mean, yeah, long COVID, I think the pandemic itself just created like people came out of the closet with disability or being disabled, left and right. And so what do we do with this new crop, with this new sense of ownership of this term? I think there's some more thinking around that, but mostly it's about like, well, tent's open, come on in.
And we have seen recent movements, just leave out this way. Black Lives Matter in the beginning. Susan Valley and I tried so hard to get them on at the table, and they finally got at the table at the at the end. But still, I mean, even in the last 2 years, police brutality has spiked. I mean, it's gone up, and most of those cases are people with disabilities. I posted a case that just happened last month about this black man being lynched, and they thought that it was the police fault. But every time I put it on social media, people's like, Leroy, that's too much. I was like, why is it too much? This guy lost his life, you know? So, once again, it's just constantly putting it out there and knowing that you're going to be attacked, but also knowing that other people are going to see it and going to accept it, so, you know. I'm sorry, once again, just using the resources that are already out there, Cincinnati Valley has, videos around, Palestine now, and, um, Crip Hop, did a whole documentary on police brutality and people with disabilities. When it came out, it got no love, but it's still out there. So just use the things that are out there, and of course give credit to the people that you're using things. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. We appreciate it. And I just want to note we have about 7 minutes remaining, and we still have about 10 questions from the audience. So we'll do our best to see if we can get through all of these, but just a time alert there for everyone. Next question, language. Should it be more relevant and inclusive when it comes to disability services? And how can we make sure that language we use, especially since it's constantly changing, does not come off as insulting?
I don't think
Go for it, Jerron.
I don't think you can. I don't think you can. I think go with love, go, or get it wrong and move on. Get it right.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Call people, call people by their names, ask people what they prefer.
I mean, Google. I mean, it's so easy nowadays. There's websites that have, politically correct terms when it comes to disability. Google. It's strange that I'm a graduate student and I tell students, I even tell professors how to Google. It's strange.
And I would just say, don't be afraid to ask people and talk to people about what they prefer, how they identify, what they expect. Talk to people like they're people, not like they're a problem that you have to figure out before you talk to them. So,
Yeah, and I would just add as well, I mean, this connects back to some of what we've already discussed, which is vulnerability. So, you can acknowledge that you don't know everything, and
you
you
don't
can
know.
openly admit that. And when you get it wrong, and you will, I promise, because we all do, you just acknowledge that and you find a way to make it right.
Yeah, and we all, whether we're people with disabilities or not, we all have anxieties, social anxieties about did we say it right or wrong. And I think Jerron has brought up the word love many times tonight, but that really is being empathetic and realizing our shared humanity is an aspect of disability culture that I think is really powerful. So SPS studies, I guess I have to take this one. SPS disability studies has a major in autism or a concentration in autism. Will you have one in physical disabilities as a concentration? I think the field of disability studies has sometimes been criticized for really being grounded primarily in physical disabilities. And I think that's a valid criticism. I think we've expanded over the decades to include things like neurodiversity, mental illness and health, invisible disabilities. That being said, I think we're open to talking about physical disabilities in new ways, and it is in the curriculum as it stands, just because there's no avoiding it, right? When we have a course in disability in the law, or we have a course in disability in the life cycle, or disability in the family, or disability services, physical disabilities inevitably come up. So for me is, how are we talking about physical disabilities? We should be talking about them in an intersectional way, where we talk about the relationship between physical disabilities, the environment, our social position and social justice. We should be talking about physical disabilities in relation to neurodiversity and in relation to other forms of disability, invisible and physical. So I'm not so much concerned about, do we have a concentration for this or that? There's so many different concentrations we could have. But are we creating a space necessary to talk about disability in broad and innovative ways? Speeding through, you want to try to get us through the next couple, Brian?
Sure. So the next question is from Lisa. Lisa says, why are we not having a seat at the table, and how do we make changes that will infiltrate society at a global level?
Okay, I have a hot take, Lisa. We might have to go local before we go global.
And sometimes we don't need to be at the table. I've seen a lot of disabled activists going to the White House to celebrate ADA or disability awareness or whatever. And I keep on telling myself, what does that do for the community? I mean, I don't need to go to the White House to do something that's gonna include the community. So so yeah, build your own table. I'll take a seat at your table way before I take a seat at the table in the White House. Because I know your table is grounded in the community. It's not, just a camera shot. So yeah.
What are your thoughts on the recognition of intersectionality in disability culture? That's for the whole panel. For example, Black and disabled and queer disabled people.
Oh my God. This is huge because I don't think I need an academic word to tell me what I've been practicing all my life. I mean, I know my mother is a woman in Black. I don't need an academic word to say that. It's sometimes we get caught up in these academic terminologies that really says what we've been doing. If you go back history with the Black Panthers, they worked with people with disabilities, they worked with Native American people, and that was way before intersectionality. We've been doing it. So I say just keep on doing it and, just keep on doing it. And sometimes you do it and it's not, on TV or not being recognized, but you're doing it, so.
All right. Well, we are at 8 p.m. This is our time. We have a few more questions. I'm okay with having you guys stick around and answer these questions if you want to extend this a few more minutes, or if you need to leave. What do folks think? We got 4 questions here.
I'm here.
All right. Well, let's do it. What system and policy changes do you feel are necessary to support the growth and recognition of disability culture?
Okay. After this one, I promise I'll be quiet.
I
But I I don't think it's policy. I think once again it's implementation. Like I said, the IDA has never been fully funded. That means it hasn't been fully implemented. San Francisco, California has the FAIR Act. The FAIR Act is an act that says that high schools and I think high schools and grade schools need to have curriculum around disability, queerness, and all that. But once again, that law hasn't been fully funded. So it's like we have these legislations, but we can't implement it because it's not fully funded. So I say this all the time, push back on all these legislators and say you need to fully fund, you need to do your work. We can't do inclusion on a state on a local level if our laws are not fully funded and not fully implemented. And now because of Trump, it's gonna be even worse. So the Democrats had decades and decades of doing this work and they haven't done it. So we'll see.
Samantha is 27 and identifies as autistic and has a question. How can we meet people without disabilities or not disabilities? I think that's what you're saying. How can we meet people with non-disabilities, and how to overcome your challenges? I think it's a question about being disabled and finding yourself in an able-bodied society or relating to people without disabilities. I'm not sure how you guys want to answer that.
Yeah, I mean, this is Jerron. It can often feel like, in my line of work, well, I'm usually the only one, or it's very rare when it's like 2 of us on a bill, um, yeah, so it can be a little exhausting. I think you have to find commonality and something and then also introduce something. So I think that a part of my going out into into the art world is like take something and give something, like what's about this world that I don't have already or don't know already, and then how can I insert something into the pool that they didn't have before, because people will always need you and your experience and um your your knowledge to help them, or to inspire them, to move them. So think about it as a give and take, reciprocity, and go where you want, like go where you're curious.
I think the next question is for Jerron. So this is from Sherry, and Sherry asks, how do you envision possibly integrating your personal professional life with community-based work geared towards social and political change?
Thank you for that, Sherry. I actually am a little like that's, especially in the work of disability and Blackness, community work is often received as less professional, and as something that is like, so I do that. So I do community work, it is, I don't know to what, I guess to say how people code it, you know? Um, but I think that what I'm trying to actually come against is like this need to, because if you are a marginalized individual, there's somehow you need to be an activist in a particular way. And I'm really trying to think about an integrated or a embodied relationship to my activism. Um, not because, you know, programming at this space would need me to be an activist for them to get the grant. I think that's one of the things I'm like really just weary of. So I'm trying to like think about my work as like like adding and doing all that stuff all at once, versus it needing to be like, oh, this is the activist piece, this is the community-based piece, this is the Black piece, this is the disabled piece. There's something around that that I really want it all to be baked in. I hope that helps.
All right. Well, we have two final questions for Ryan and one final question for the whole panel. So maybe we'll just bundle these for Ryan here and then finish it up with this one question from the panelists. Ryan, what inspired your work towards becoming an ally for the disability community, especially in sports?
I think what inspired my work is just my experience as an individual born with my disability, and then also how sports really transformed my life. And, you know, I feel like it's my calling to try to create programs that offer that same opportunity to other individuals, whether it's in my university role or in my nonprofit role.
Great. And Ryan, this question comes from a Paralympian. And they ask, I recognize that Ryan is connected with Paralympic movement. I encourage folks and attendees to also consider the Deaf Olympics and the Special Olympics in this disability justice context. I am a Paralympian who is trying to lean into the practice of since a valid principle of commitment to cross-disability solidarity. So do you have any thoughts, Ryan, on Special Olympics, Deaf Olympics, other movements in sports that you might find solidarity with?
Yeah, I think all sport program, you know, I always use the phrase inclusive sports with the idea of including Special Olympics, Paralympics, and kind of trying to put everything under that umbrella to recognize the vast array of opportunities that are available, and not just totally focus on the Paralympic movement. I think for me, you know, Paralympic sport and wheelchair basketball specifically was really influential in my life, and I hope to create that opportunity for others. But at the same time, I'm also not, it's not remiss or lost on me that could be served, you know, somebody could be getting that same feeling through Special Olympics or another sport modality or dance or, you know, theater or art. I think there's, you know, as an individual with a disability, I think you have to find what gives you purpose and gives you passion. For me, it's sports. For some of the other panelists, it's something else. No one thing is right or wrong. It's about finding where you feel that you belong and you can express yourself and be the person you want to be. And for me, that was sport. But I recognize that could be a different form of sport for somebody else or a completely different discipline or genre of something. And I think that's one of the themes of this, you know, tonight's discussion is the importance of finding yourself in a greater purpose in a way to express yourself, you know, the good, bad, and the ugly around your disability sometimes.
Thank you, everybody. And thanks for those of you who are still hanging around for our final question and for our panelists as well for everything that you've given us tonight. Courtney asked, how do you pull in members of the disability community to help with advocacy or awareness, even if they don't identify as disabled, either because they don't feel they're disabled enough to have a place or because they don't see their condition as being a disability?
I think for me, I don't think there's a measure of a level of disability that gives you, hey, if you're this percentage of disabled, you're able to have this level of voice. So I think, you know, whether your disability is minimally invasive or whether you totally, or whether it's something more profound, I think there's a role and an opportunity, you know, Gerard said, open up the tank, come on in, right? Like, I think there's I think there's opportunity for everybody. But I also think that needs to be a decision and a choice for every member of the community. And I can't make that for Gerard. I can't make that choice for Leroy. And I would assume my colleagues would say the same thing. They can't make that for somebody else. But we can do is foster a safe and open space where there's dialogue, and when that person feels comfortable to receive that or to welcome that in, that we're there for them. But I think that is totally something that needs to be an individual decision.
Jerron or Leroy?
Let's like make it look cool. Yeah.
And you do, Jerron. Just
Yep.
Yeah,
All of our panelists are making it look pretty cool, I think.
yeah, for example, building this Hip Hop Institute, it's more than a display issue. It's a community issue. It's leading history. So I come to it saying that it's more than disability. It's like your work is gonna affect people that you don't even know about. I didn't know that hip hop had one of our biggest chapters is in Tanzania. Yeah, Tanzania barely have internet, but they're one of the biggest hip hop chapters. So I say once again, it's more the issue. We got so many issues and especially now with the new administration, we need to be on it 24/7. So reach out to me because I definitely need people to get involved to help build this institute. It's going to take a lot of people work, a lot of money, and a lot of trying to convince people that it's needed.
Thank you, everyone, once again. Just to wrap us up and close this up, I would say I would add to what everyone else is saying, and I totally agree with Ryan and Jerron and Leroy. But I would add one thing that Ashley Shu's work does pretty well, and I wish she were here to speak to this, but she takes on the divide between older people and people with disabilities and really says we really need to break down barriers around ageism and stigma around disability so that people understand that we are connected throughout the lifespan with these challenges. And I think that's part of what disability culture can do and why it's so powerful is that even though it allows spaces for so many different cultures to exist and so many different ways to challenge the dominant culture, it also creates a space for broadening the scope of what it means to live in a body and be a person, and to accept and embrace our vulnerabilities and our differences as sources of strength and not as deficits. Thank you all again for being here and helping us to celebrate 20 years of disability studies at SPS. Thank you once again to this amazing panel of wonderful humans, Jerron Herman, Leroy Moore, Ryan Martin, and Ashley Shu in absentia. If you're not familiar with her work, definitely check it out and look for all of these folks on the internet and elsewhere.
So thank you all again. Have a wonderful, wonderful evening.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. And many, many thanks to our panelists and to Heather again, and to all of you for your great questions and participation. Really appreciate it. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you so much.